Botswana, the world's leading diamond producer, has made a monumental decision that has sent shockwaves through the global mining industry. In an act of defiance and a bid for economic sovereignty, the nation has banned the export of all raw diamonds and unprocessed minerals. This bold move marks a new chapter for the African continent, shifting the balance of power from foreign corporations to local control. The announcement came directly from President Mokgweetsi Masisi, whose administration is known for its decisive actions. Flanked by members of the Ministry of Minerals and Energy, he declared that Botswana would no longer serve as a mere supplier of raw wealth for foreign prosperity. From now on, every ounce of material dug from the earth must be refined and finished within the country's borders. This isn't just rhetoric. A sweeping executive directive was issued immediately, grounding shipments at airports and border points. Containers of copper, concentrate, and diamond parcels were halted, pending confirmation of domestic processing. The ban applies across the board to raw diamonds, copper concentrates, nickel, and other minerals, which can no longer be exported unless value has been added within Botswana itself. This means that minerals must be refined, cut, polished, or processed by domestic firms or partnerships based on Botswanan soil. This is a radical shift for a country that has built its economy on the export of raw resources. Botswana's diamond sector alone accounts for nearly 30% of its GDP and over 80% of its export revenue. For decades, rough diamonds from mines like Jwaneng and Orapa were packaged and shipped out within days to be processed in places like India and Belgium. That model has now collapsed overnight. Mining companies, including major players like De Beers, were left scrambling. Some paused operations, while others sought emergency meetings with government ministers. Foreign investors have issued carefully worded statements about policy clarity, but one thing is clear: Botswana isn't bluffing. The government is also preparing a new legislative package to legally solidify this policy. Companies that fail to comply could lose their mining licenses, while firms that invest in local processing by setting up cutting factories, refineries, or training centers will reportedly receive tax incentives and fast-track permits. Although this move may seem abrupt, it has been months in the making. Sources close to the Ministry of Trade reveal that President Masisi's inner circle has been studying the failures of resource policies in other African nations. Their conclusion is a simple but powerful one. If Africa wants to be rich, it can't continue to export its resources in their raw, unrefined state. This isn't just about Botswana. It's a statement to the world that Africa is ready to take control of its own destiny. The message is clear. The continent will no longer be a source of raw materials for others to profit from. By demanding that value be added on its own soil, Botswana is paving the way for a more prosperous and independent future, not just for itself, but potentially for the entire continent. The international community is watching Botswana's bold move with a mixture of apprehension and admiration. The World Diamond Council and global commodity markets are on high alert, with some fearing a domino effect across the continent. Others, however, are quietly acknowledging that Botswana may be demonstrating what true economic leverage looks like for resource-rich nations. Botswana, a small, landlocked country rich in minerals, has fundamentally changed the rules of the game. This shift wasn't driven by sanctions or threats, but by a simple refusal to participate in a system that no longer served its interests. But what exactly led to this high-stakes, drastic change? The crisis that sparked the change. The ban on raw exports was not a product of political ideology. It was a response to immense economic pressure. By early 2025, Botswana's economy, which is heavily reliant on diamonds, began to buckle under a perfect storm of challenges. First, global demand for natural diamonds plummeted, causing prices to fall by over 40% in just 18 months. This decline sent Botswana's export earnings into a free fall. At the same time, the rise of lab-grown diamonds, cheaper, chemically identical, and increasingly accepted by consumers, was quietly revolutionizing the jewelry market. Gen Z buyers and sustainability-conscious millennials were shifting away from mined stones, cracking the illusion of eternal scarcity that had long propped up the diamond industry. As the world's second-largest producer of natural diamonds, Botswana was left dangerously exposed. Unlike nations with diversified economies, Botswana's government budget, public wages, and infrastructure spending were all intimately tied to the performance of the diamond market. When sales tanked, the effects were immediate and severe. Hospitals delayed upgrades, schools froze hiring, and rural development funds shrank, reclaiming economic sovereignty. The core issue was a flawed economic model where foreign firms held all the leverage. Raw stones were immediately shipped overseas to be cut, polished, and retailed, with Botswana receiving only a fraction of the total value. The country was essentially exporting its wealth in its cheapest form and then importing it back at 10 times the price. For decades, high diamond prices had cushioned this imbalance, but with the market collapsing, the system's flaws became unbearable. Upon taking office, President Masisi's administration commissioned a damning economic review. The findings were clear. For every $100 earned globally from a Botswanan diamond, the country kept less than $10. The rest vanished through foreign processing, shipping, branding, and retail markups. Economists warned that if the market continued to fall and Botswana kept exporting raw materials, a fiscal collapse was a real risk. This moment was the turning point. Not ideology, but sheer necessity. The solution was to break the pattern by stopping the export of value and starting to capture it at home. The ban on raw exports, therefore, is not a standalone policy but the first step in a broader strategy to rebuild the entire value chain within Botswana, from mine to market. Facing mounting economic pressure, the government of Botswana took a calculated risk to stop exporting raw resources and instead build a domestic processing industry from the ground up. While critics argued that this move was too risky amid a market downturn, the administration of President Masisi saw a greater danger in inaction. The country had spent decades digging for its riches, only to see the profits accumulate in foreign hands. Now, that pipeline is being sealed. The crisis made one thing clear. Botswana's wealth must be earned and retained at home, or it isn't wealth at all. But how can a country with limited infrastructure and industrial experience process everything it extracts? Can Botswana realistically build this new system from scratch? Let us pause for a moment to express our sincere gratitude to the African Intel community. Your trusted gateway to authentic African voices, powerful stories, and enduring legacies that continue to inspire and uplift. When Botswana halted raw exports, it wasn't just rejecting an old system, it was announcing the birth of a new one. The ban, which appeared to be a shutdown from the outside, was actually the beginning of a massive industrial undertaking within the country's borders. The strategy is not to wait for global prices to rebound, but to use every mineral extracted as a catalyst for local transformation. This transformation starts with infrastructure. Not just roads and ports, but factories, vocational schools, and high-tech workshops designed to handle every stage of mineral processing. The vision is simple. If wealth is going to be extracted, every step of the value chain must remain under Botswanan control. To achieve this, the government has launched the National Processing and Beneficiation Program, NPBP, earmarking nearly $500 million for domestic industrial capacity building. This funding, sourced from state mining revenues and strategic investments from Africa-focused development banks, will be used to construct the continent's most advanced diamond cutting and copper refining facilities. These facilities will be built not in Europe or Asia, but in the heart of southern Africa. From raw materials to high-value products, construction is already underway on 3 major diamond economic zones in Gaborone, near the Orapa mine, and in Francistown. These zones will house state-of-the-art polishing labs, automated sorting facilities, and training academies. They will also feature jewelry design studios where local artisans can move beyond raw extraction to branding and exporting finished luxury goods. The initiative extends beyond diamonds. The government has partnered with South Korean and Chinese firms to build modular copper and nickel refineries, which will process the concentrates previously shipped abroad. These facilities will be partially state-owned to ensure that profits circulate within the country, with agreements mandating local hiring quotas and knowledge transfer plans. Job creation is a central component of this strategy. While raw exports enriched a handful of elite stakeholders, local processing has the potential to employ tens of thousands of people, from factory workers and lab technicians to logistics managers and designers. The NPBP estimates that over 38,000 new jobs could be created within the next 5 years if just 60% of Botswana's mineral output is processed domestically. Ultimately, this project is about more than just economics. It's about national pride. By processing its own diamonds and selling them under a new national label, Botswana is taking control of its destiny and eliminating the long-standing image of a nation that ships out its wealth only to buy it back at a premium. Botswana's ambitious industrialization plan, while promising, faces significant challenges. Critics are quick to point out that diamond processing is a highly specialized craft that requires years of training, sophisticated machinery, and a vast, reliable electricity supply, resources that Botswana is still working to scale up. In response, the government has launched the Botswana Industrial Skills Academy, BISA, to train the next generation of technicians, while simultaneously accelerating the expansion of solar and hydroelectric power projects to support its new industrial base. Botswana is navigating a tightrope between ambition and execution, but for the first time in its history, it is no longer asking what the world wants from its minerals. It is asking what it can do with them itself. Botswana's refusal to export raw minerals has not only reshaped its own economic trajectory, but has also sent shockwaves through the entire global diamond and resource trade. For decades, multinational corporations built their supply chains on the assumption that Africa would provide the raw materials and they would handle the profitable processing. This compliant, high-margin model is now in jeopardy. The most visible impact is on De Beers, which has a long-standing partnership with the Botswanan government through their joint venture, Debswana. While this partnership provided Botswana with partial ownership and significant revenue, De Beers maintained control over marketing, pricing, and downstream operations. With the new ban, this balance of power has been upended. De Beers can no longer export raw stones in bulk without first engaging with local cutters, polishers, and other value-added partners. This has stalled shipments, squeezed profit margins, and replaced the predictability of their long-standing arrangement with a new era of uncertainty. Industry analysts report that some mines have paused operations not just due to weak demand, but to completely restructure their supply chain logistics to comply with Botswana's new laws. Every aspect, from freight contracts and insurance clauses to customs agreements, must be rewritten. The ripple effects extend beyond diamonds. Copper traders, particularly from East Asia, are facing similar delays. Investors in other sectors are also growing nervous, fearing that Botswana's assertive policy model could spread to other commodities like coal, uranium, or rare earths. However, while multinational corporations scramble, African leaders are paying close attention. From the Democratic Republic of Congo to Namibia, discussions have reportedly accelerated around implementing similar bans or strengthening their own beneficiation laws. The African Union Commission on Trade and Industry has allegedly requested a formal review of Botswana's approach, and there are rumors of a continent-wide summit to reassess Africa's role in global mineral markets. Meanwhile, traditional processing hubs in places like Surat, India, where 90% of the world's diamonds are cut and polished, are bracing for long-term losses. Industry spokespeople are already warning of job losses if Botswana's model gains traction in other diamond-producing nations. What began as an act of economic necessity for Botswana is now setting a powerful precedent for the entire continent. The world is watching to see if this single nation can successfully break free from old partnerships and forge a new, more prosperous path for itself. Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on African intel, stories, history, and identity. Antwerp's diamond bourses, once cornerstones of global luxury, are now grappling with the unsettling prospect of sourcing fewer and more expensive stones. This is not an isolationist revolt. Botswana has kept the door open for foreign investment, inviting companies to relocate their factories and operate on Botswana's terms. Several mid-tier firms have already begun negotiations to establish joint ventures, recognizing that the new gold rush is not in extraction but in partnership and local value creation. Critics who predicted immediate international backlash have been proven wrong. Rather than being punished or sanctioned, Botswana is being courted. The global economy still needs its diamonds and minerals, but now it must play by a new set of rules. This new leverage, however, isn't guaranteed to last. If the transition falters or the new domestic infrastructure fails to meet industry standards, these new partners could withdraw. But if Botswana can hold the line, it might be the first African nation to fundamentally change its economic model and walk away with more than just promises. This raises the most pressing question. Is this just a bold experiment or the beginning of a real, irreversible transformation for the entire continent? For decades, African leaders have talked about beneficiation, the domestic processing of raw materials to add value. Policies have been drafted, but few have followed through. The reason is simple. True beneficiation is expensive, politically risky, and requires a long-term national commitment. What sets Botswana apart is its willingness to endure short-term turbulence for a long-term vision. This is where transformation begins, not with press releases, but with sacrifice. The short-term costs are real. Export revenues have dipped, production has slowed, and the workforce is still being trained for a high-tech industrial base. But if Botswana can sustain the disruption, it will fundamentally restructure how wealth is created and retained in Africa. At its core, Botswana's new model is about control over pricing, supply chains, and labor markets. It's about using a nation's resources to build its own future, not someone else's. This is a dramatic reversal of the traditional African role in the global economy, where value is extracted at the source and processed for profit abroad. If this model succeeds, Botswana won't just be a mine. It could become a manufacturing and branding powerhouse. Imagine walking into a high-end store in Paris or Dubai and seeing luxury jewelry tagged, designed, cut, and finished in Botswana. Imagine smart devices with copper wires labeled refined in Botswana. That label would no longer just represent a resource. It would represent a nation's pride, expertise, and economic strength. This vision also challenges Africa's long-standing dependence on global financial institutions and volatile commodity prices. With greater local processing, Botswana could stabilize its revenue base, diversify its exports, and build industries that insulate it from external shocks. Instead of reacting to global demand, it could begin to shape it, offering a powerful blueprint for other African nations to follow. For other African nations watching from the sidelines, Botswana's experiment is a revelation. It is demonstrating that a small, landlocked country with limited industrial history can stand up to global giants and demand fairer terms. This changes everything, sparking new debates in capitals across the continent. If Botswana can do it, why not us? Of course, risks remain. Global companies could choose to sidestep Botswana entirely and find cheaper alternatives elsewhere. Domestic infrastructure might not scale up fast enough, creating processing bottlenecks that damage the sector's credibility. And political will could falter in the face of elite resistance or public impatience, stalling the entire project. For now, however, the commitment appears unshaken. Botswana is not simply reacting to a crisis. It is consciously stepping into the unknown to construct a new kind of African economy. In this new model, value is not shipped away, but built and owned from within. This is more than just economic policy. It's a new narrative. It's a small nation telling the world, we are no longer a pit to be emptied. We are a force to be reckoned with. And if that message spreads, Africa might finally break the chains that have bound it for centuries, not with protest, but with production. The final question is whether this model can truly last, and more importantly, whether it can scale across the continent. While the final chapter has yet to be written, Botswana is providing a powerful case study in economic sovereignty. It is forcing a global conversation about whether Africa can truly become rich if it continues to let others process its wealth. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more stories that explore untold African stories, culture, history, and power, make sure to subscribe to African Intel and tap the bell icon so you never miss an update. Thank you for watching, and until next time, stay informed, stay inspired, and stay connected.